Do you truly believe you control your choices? Today, two giants of thought transcend time and space to meet at the heart of a question that has challenged us since the dawn of civilization. Is free will real, or just a cosmic illusion? On one side, Baruch Spinoza, the 17th century philosopher who saw the universe as a perfect machine governed by immutable laws. To him, the freedom we think we have is merely a reflection of our ignorance about the causes that control us. On the other side, Sam Harris, a contemporary neuroscientist who dives into the depths of the human mind, presenting evidence that our decisions are made before we are even aware of them. For Harris, free will is nothing more than an illusion we carry to justify our actions. This debate is not merely philosophical or scientific. It is an inquiry into who we are and how we interpret our existence. If free will is an illusion, what does that mean for morality, responsibility, and the choices that shape our lives? Spinoza challenges you to embrace the inevitable and find freedom in understanding necessity. Harris, on the other hand, invites you to let go of the idea of control and view the world through the lens of scientific determinism. Two thinkers, two worlds, one question that challenges our very essence. Get ready for a journey that may shake the foundations of what you believe about yourself. Are your choices truly your own? Or are you merely a passenger on a train whose destination has already been decided? And you watching now, are you ready to question everything you know about free will? Let's find out.
Imagine a stone being thrown through the air. It moves with a specific velocity and direction, guided by the laws of physics. Now, imagine that this stone develops consciousness mid-flight and believes it has chosen to move this way. That, Sam, is what I see when I look at humans. You and I are no different from that stone, Amat. The universe is a perfect machine, governed by natural laws we cannot alter. Every action, every thought, every emotion we experience is the inevitable result of a chain of causes stretching back to the beginning of time. Freedom, as you understand it, is an illusion born of our ignorance of these causes. Think of the stars in the sky, the river that flows, or the wind that blows. None of these move by their own will. And yet everything functions with absolute precision. The same applies to you, Sam. Your thoughts, your decisions, your actions, all are determined by forces beyond your control. And now, you tell me that science proves free will doesn't exist. I agree. But how can you, a neuroscientist, claim autonomy when your very thoughts and theories are merely the inevitable results of chemical processes in the brain? Do you consider yourself free, Sam? Free for what?
Spinoza, I appreciate your metaphor of the stone. But unlike the stone, we are conscious beings, and it is precisely this consciousness that reveals what you call an illusion. Science shows us that the decisions we make do not originate in consciousness. They are the product of neurological processes that occur before we have any awareness of them. I'll give you a practical example. Neuroscience experiments like those conducted by Benjamin Libet demonstrate that brain activity corresponding to a decision can be detected seconds before a person becomes aware of having made that decision. In other words, the brain has already decided before you know it has. Your thoughts are no different. They arise spontaneously without your control. Try it now, Spinoza. Think of a number between 1 and 10. The number that came to your mind, why was it that number? You didn't consciously choose it. It simply appeared, like all our thoughts. And as for your provocation, the determinism you advocate doesn't refute my position. It supports it. The science we use to explore the brain and the mind confirms that we are, as you said, part of a cosmic machine. But where we differ is in the implication this has for the human experience. I don't need autonomy to demonstrate that free will is an illusory construct. Spinoza, if we accept that our actions are determined by forces beyond our control, how do you justify the idea of morality or responsibility? Imagine someone committing a terrible crime. If they didn't choose to do it, why should they be punished? And more importantly, how can we educate or correct behavior in a world where choices aren't truly choices? Without free will, justice seems like a farce. What do you propose to uphold a functional society within your determinism?
The question you raise, Sam, is one of the greatest misunderstandings about determinism. Moral responsibility does not depend on free will, it depends on reason. When a man commits a crime, he does so because he is out of harmony with the rational order of the universe. Punishment, in this case, is not an act of vengeance, but a necessary action to restore that harmony. Imagine the universe as a clock. If one gear fails, we do not blame the gear, we fix the mechanism. The same applies to humans. Punishment is merely a tool to adjust behavior and bring the individual back into balance. And as for education, it does not rely on free choice. It is a process of shaping minds and behaviors, much like rain shapes the land. When we accept that everything is determined, we gain the opportunity to act with compassion and understanding rather than judgment. Because, Sam, while you are not free to choose, you can be free to understand.
But Spinoza, in saying this, you erase the concept of responsibility as we know it. If the criminal is just a cog in a system, why should he bear the burden of his actions? Wouldn't it be unjust to punish someone for something they couldn't avoid? Moreover, your vision of harmony seems to overlook the complexity of human experience. We are not machines that simply adjust behaviors. What you call harmony is, in practice, nothing more than a force imposing consequences to reinforce social rules. That, Spinoza, is closer to control than to freedom.
Sam, your criticism is valid, but it is rooted in a limited perspective. When a man who is ill is treated, no one asks whether he chose the illness. We treat him because it is the rational thing to do. The same applies to morality. When we understand that human actions are inevitable, we begin to view society as something to be cared for and adjusted, not judged. And no, I do not ignore the complexity of human experience. On the contrary, it is precisely this complexity that makes determinism so powerful. Accepting that everything is determined is not a form of control, but a liberation. When you understand necessity, you cease to struggle against it. You asked me why a criminal should bear the weight of their actions. I return the question. If we know they did not choose, why not shape their circumstances so they act differently in the future? Justice does not have to be punitive, it can be restorative.
I agree, Spinoza, that justice should be more restorative than punitive. But what you fail to acknowledge is that without the concept of choice, we lose the foundation for holding anyone accountable for anything. If everything is inevitable, how do we determine what is just? How do we decide who deserves to be corrected and who does not? Beyond that, your notion of inner freedom feels like a consolation. It's like telling a chained person they are free to accept their chains. That is not freedom, Spinoza. It's resignation.
Sam, you speak of freedom as something absolute, but absolute freedom is a contradiction. We are always bound by something, gravity or the chemical processes in the brain you so often mention. What I offer is not resignation, but clarity. When you understand the causes that shape you, you gain the power to live in harmony with them. True freedom does not lie in doing the impossible, but in living without illusion. You believe you are free because you prefer that illusion to understanding. I prefer the truth, even if it reveals that we are merely part of a grand natural order.
Even so, Spinoza, I cannot accept that the absence of choice can sustain a just society. Perhaps, in the end, what you call harmony I see as philosophical conformity. After all, if we cannot change anything, why even bother debating?
Because, Sam, debating is part of that same natural order. I did not choose to be here, just as you did not. Yet our words, our arguments are the gears of the universe turning. Perhaps we do not choose, but we are instruments of the reason that guides the cosmos. And regarding your point about conformity, I ask you this. What is more conformist, living bound by an illusion of control or accepting reality as it is? Sam, you mentioned machines capable of predicting human decisions before a person becomes aware of them. These very machines, these tools of modern science, are the greatest evidence that we are merely parts of a vast universal machine. If the movements of your brain can be predicted, what remains of your idea of autonomy? What you call free will is nothing more than a sensation, something as automatic as a heartbeat or the light of the stars. And like a clock, each piece functions exactly as it should within the grand mechanism of the universe.
Spinoza, it's ironic that you use machines to support your position because they also reveal the fragility of your logic. If everything is predetermined, then even the philosophy you defend is inevitable. You didn't choose to believe in determinism. You were merely carried to it by the same forces that brought me here to refute you. If your view is inevitable, how can we trust it as an objective truth? Wouldn't it simply be the result of a blind process that led you to this point? Wouldn't your philosophy in that case also be subject to the same machine you describe?
Sam, truth does not require freedom to exist. Mathematics and the laws of physics do not depend on choice to be real. The fact that my philosophy is inevitable does not invalidate it. It reinforces it. Just as gravity acts without the stone's consent, truth manifests independently of human will. Let me use an analogy. Imagine the universe as a symphony. Each note is played at precisely the right moment with absolute precision, creating a harmony that we, as limited beings, can only begin to comprehend. You may not have chosen to hear this music, Sam, but it remains beautiful and true.
And yet, Spinoza, a symphony is not a sufficient metaphor to capture the complexity of the human brain. The brain is not a passive piece in an orchestra. It's an active machine that processes inputs to generate inevitable outputs. What you see as cosmic harmony, I see as the mechanical result of interconnected systems. Imagine a computer. It processes data based on programming and external variables, producing an inevitable result. The human brain is like that computer. It doesn't choose, it simply responds. But that response, while inevitable, isn't part of some grand music. It's just the outcome of chemical and electrical reactions.
Sam, the human brain is indeed a machine, but you forget that it doesn't operate in isolation. It is part of this greater symphony. The difference between us is that I see beauty and purpose in the fact that everything is interconnected, while you reduce it all to cold mechanical processes. You describe the brain as a computer. I describe the universe as a work of art. A symphony may be inevitable, but its inevitability doesn't diminish its meaning. On the contrary, it makes it more sublime.
But Spinoza, the question isn't whether the universe is beautiful or sublime. The question is, what does this vision offer in terms of practical utility? You may find comfort in the idea that we are parts of a grand symphony, but how does that help humanity navigate ethical or social issues? Science, at least, gives us tools to understand and act, while your vision seems to simply invite us to accept.
Acceptance is not resignation, Sam. Acceptance is the first step toward acting in harmony with what is real. When you accept that you are not in control, you stop fighting against nature and begin working with it. That is true freedom. Freedom is not acting without constraints. It's understanding those constraints and acting within them. And as for utility, let me return the question. Does your scientific view, which denies free will, truly offer anything beyond a mechanical explanation? If everything is inevitable, how do you justify your own actions to improve the world? Are you not yourself bound by the very chemical and electrical reactions you describe?
Science doesn't promise liberation in the traditional sense. What it offers is clarity. Knowing that we are machines of inputs and outputs isn't resignation. It's an opportunity to shape the inputs to improve the outputs. If we understand that free will is an illusion, we can design systems that account for our limitations, systems that prevent errors before they occur. My view may seem cold to you, but I see in it a potential for evolution. We don't need a symphony to justify human progress. We just need to understand how we function and use that understanding to build something better.
And perhaps that is where our fundamental divergence lies, Sam. You look at humanity and see a machine to be fine-tuned. I look at humanity and see an inevitable miracle, not because we chose to be, but because we exist as part of something far greater than ourselves. Perhaps we will never agree on the meaning of determinism, but I would say that in the end, whether a machine or a symphony, we are both grappling with the same inevitable truth.
Spinoza, let me bring our discussion to more practical ground. If we agree that free will is an illusion, what does that mean for the justice system? It's built on the idea that people choose to commit crimes and therefore deserve punishment. But if we accept that criminals have no choice, shouldn't we treat them as patients rather than perpetrators? Consider this. Neuroscience has already begun influencing legal decisions. In some cases, findings about brain damage or chemical imbalances have led judges to reduce sentences or recommend treatment instead of imprisonment. Isn't that a direct reflection of the determinism you advocate? And if it is, Spinoza, how far should we take this? Should all human actions being inevitable be treated as symptoms of a condition to be corrected? What would you say to a victim who seeks justice but is faced with a system that views their aggressor merely as a broken cog in a larger machine?
Sam, you raise an important question, but as always, you approach it in fragments. What I propose is not excusing destructive behavior, but understanding it. When we accept determinism, we acknowledge that the criminal did not choose their actions, but that doesn't mean we should allow them to continue causing harm. In fact, justice should be more compassionate and rational. Punishment, as I have said, is not vengeance, but a means to restore order and harmony. What you call treatment, I would call rebalancing. We do not punish because the criminal deserves it, but because society needs to correct the course of things. And regarding your point about victims, I would say this. True justice is not perpetuating the cycle of pain, but breaking it. Recognizing that the aggressor is a product of circumstances does not invalidate the victim's pain, but helps us build a system that reduces future tragedies. The freedom you seek, Sam, in choice is an illusion. True freedom is accepting what is necessary and acting based on that acceptance. Only then can we create a society in harmony with the natural laws.
I understand your position, Spinoza, but there's a problem. Your concept of harmony seems to overlook the complexity of human experience. It's not just the victim who seeks justice, it's society as a whole, which organizes itself around the idea of responsibility. If we start treating every action as inevitable, aren't we weakening the social fabric that sustains our interactions? Take, for instance, a serial killer. You would say they are merely a reflection of their circumstances. But how do we explain to a society that they didn't choose to kill? How would you justify restoring harmony at the cost of others' sense of security and justice?
Sam, what you call the social fabric is nothing more than a set of conventions created within the universal machine. If a cog breaks, you don't blame the cog, you fix the machine. The same applies to the serial killer you mentioned. They didn't choose to be who they are, but we must act to prevent further harm. The difference is that by accepting determinism, our action is not punitive but corrective. Imagine a society where people do not seek vengeance but understanding, where instead of destroying the other, we seek to rehabilitate them. This does not weaken the social fabric, it strengthens it. Let me be clear. Accepting determinism does not mean abandoning corrective actions. It means acting based on reason, not emotion. A serial killer is not excused but treated as part of a system that requires adjustment.
And yet, Spinoza, your vision is difficult to implement on a large scale. What you're suggesting is a fundamental shift in how we view responsibility and justice. While I see value in a more compassionate system, I wonder, to what extent would this be functional? What prevents us from embracing determinism so fully that we stop acting altogether, believing everything is out of our control?
Sam, the functionality of a system does not invalidate its truth. Determinism doesn't stop us from acting. It guides us to act with clarity. Knowing that everything is determined doesn't paralyze us. It allows us to see where we can intervene to adjust the course of things. And as for scale, it's not about changing everything at once. It's about starting small, applying this understanding to systems of justice, education, and social interaction. When we act in harmony with necessity, our actions cease to be emotional reactions and become rational responses.
Perhaps, Spinoza, but even your proposals for rebalancing and harmony rely on decisions that someone inevitably has to make. Who decides what harmony is? Who decides how to adjust the system? And wouldn't those decisions themselves be subject to the same determinism you advocate?
Exactly, Sam. Those decisions are inevitable, just as our discussion here is. But the fact that they are inevitable doesn't make them any less meaningful. They are part of the grand movement of the universal machine. Perhaps the greatest challenge is accepting that, even within this determinism, we can find purpose and significance. In the end, the question isn't whether we act freely or not. It's how we use the knowledge of determinism to create a world that is more understanding and in harmony with the laws of nature.
Spinoza, for all our disagreements, there's one thing I believe we can agree on. The perception of free will, even if it's an illusion, is fundamental to the human experience. Most people aren't ready to view life through the lens of determinism. This illusion sustains social systems, personal motivations, and even our idea of progress.
Yes, Sam, I agree. The illusion of free will is powerful and perhaps even necessary in some respects. For many, believing they have control gives their lives meaning. That belief keeps them moving, encourages them to plan and act. But the fact that it's an illusion doesn't diminish its practical utility. It's like a tool, something nature has given us to fulfill our role in the universal order.
And that's why, even as I argue for its non-existence, I recognize that we cannot simply dismantle this perception. Society as we know it would collapse without the idea that we are responsible for our actions. However, I do believe we can begin to integrate the knowledge of determinism to create fairer and more compassionate systems.
Exactly. The knowledge of determinism doesn't have to eliminate free will as a concept. It can coexist as a functional illusion. And paradoxically, by understanding that we are not free, we can act more consciously, more aligned with the causes that shape our existence.
So perhaps the real question isn't merely whether free will exists, but how we can use the perception of it for the collective good. Accepting determinism while acknowledging the value of the illusion might be the key to transforming our society without dismantling its foundations.
Yes, Sam. And in this, I believe we find common ground. Free will as an illusion has its place. It is the bridge between what we are and what we need to do to live in harmony. We don't need to deny its utility, even as we recognize its illusory nature.
So we agree that, even as an illusion, the concept of free will holds an indispensable practical function for daily life and society as a whole. But we also agree that by understanding it as an illusion, we can begin to create a reality more aligned with our true nature.
Free will. For some, it is the essence of humanity. For others, it is an illusion that conceals the real forces shaping us. Today, Spinoza and Harris brought forth arguments that transcend time and challenge our understanding of freedom and responsibility. Spinoza challenges us to see the beauty in accepting the inevitable, finding a deeper freedom in understanding necessity. Harris shows us that by abandoning the illusion of control, we can create fairer systems and use the knowledge of determinism to improve the world. Two thinkers, two paths, and one defining question: are we truly free? But the real debate doesn't end here. It continues within you, in your choices or the absence of them. Do you see yourself as the conductor of your life, directing your decisions? Or as a note in a cosmic symphony, played with inevitable precision? And more importantly, what does this perspective mean for your relationships, your ambitions, and the way you face the future? The answer lies not only in the ideas of Spinoza or Harris, but in how you interpret your own experiences and choose, or not to act on them. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe in free will? Or do you see our choices as part of a greater universal mechanism? Share too who you'd like to see debating in the next episode. How about Nietzsche and Buddha discussing the meaning of life? Or Darwin and Plato exploring the evolution of morality? If this debate expanded your mind, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could benefit from these ideas. After all, questioning what we are is the first step to understanding our role in the universe. And remember, whether or not you believe in free will, what matters is how you use that perspective to grow. See you in the next episode of The Great Debates, where we explore the great questions that shape humanity.